Hey, Legal Rebels, this is Tom Martin. I'm the founder of LawDroid, and this is my podcast, LawDroid Manifesto, where I interview legal innovators about how they do what they do. In this episode, I interview Olga Mack, who's a digital transformation executive, and she's transformed herself from a top general counsel to a CEO of a legal tech company, and now has become a LinkedIn legal tech influencer and thought leader. She'll be sharing advice about how she made her career choices, where she thinks the future of law is going, and how you too can be brave and choose to have the career you've always dreamed of. Hey everyone, welcome back to LawDroid Manifesto podcast. I'm Tom Martin, your host, and I'm so excited today to have Olga Mack as my guest. And Olga is fascinating and everywhere all at once. She is a digital transformation executive. She's a former legal tech CEO and founder, three times TEDx speaker, top voice on LinkedIn with over 35,000 followers, the Gen AI editor at the MIT Computational Law Report, and many, many other things. With no further ado, I'd like to introduce Olga, and if you could tell us about anything else you're working on.
Oh, hi, Tom. It's good to see you. Working on many things as always, but also I'm taking a break, and I guess sometimes call myself a retired lady.
Well, I'm sure that you're doing a lot, even with that. Um, so I guess first off, I wanted to get to know you a little bit better. I know that as one thing you feature on your LinkedIn profile is made in Ukraine, right?
Yes, indeed, that happened too.
And well, in getting to know you better, I've read that you moved from the Ukraine to San Francisco when you're around 13. Is that right?
Yes, I was a teenager, early teenager. I went to middle school for about 2 weeks in the United States. We immigrated right at the end of the middle school. My parents value education, so they could not imagine a future where I missed 2 weeks of school. And so I went to middle school in San Francisco for exactly 2 weeks and have my middle school diploma from San Francisco middle school, public middle school, and then I did start high school. So I was around 13 when we immigrated. I was born in Ukraine. I lived in many countries, including Russia and surrounding countries. And when we left, we did leave from Ukraine. So made in Ukraine is the reason for that is because that's my identity. If you sort of want to identify which land, ethnically, I'm many things, including Ukrainian. And of course, when we left as political refugees, we had to surrender our passports. So I'm not a Ukrainian citizen. So it's easier to discuss where I was born and so to speak, where I was made, and which land I consider mine. But saying that I'm Ukrainian has a much deeper meaning, and I may or may not qualify for that definition.
I hear you. I think we all contain multitudes. You know, my my background too is many different places, and and I think we all on our journey of life, we create an identity for ourselves from all of those things that we love the best about our family and the people that we care about. So no, I love seeing that on your profile, and I thought it was intriguing because when you come to things with um when you come to things having a different perspective, I think that someone who moves from one place to another brings to it. It helps you to see things that sometimes people that are living there or already in that culture can't see for themselves. Did you find that that was the case for you, that it helped you to see things in a different light or maybe bring a different perspective to life?
Yeah, it's interesting. I never really felt different. I sort of am what I know best. I tell people that, in Ukraine and former Soviet Union, I was sort of an average Jane. In my elementary school class of 24, I was one of 13 Olgas. I'm not kidding. It's an average Jane name, you know. So I don't by default think that I'm different. The world sometimes tell me that I'm a little different, consistently and persistently, and I guess now I will believe it. But I do remember landing here. It was not my top choice to move. I was a teenager with my circle of friends, um, my social life, which I valued a lot, my interests in art, for example, and my plans. I had plans to graduate early. I didn't have plans to finish high school all the way. My plan was to develop an art portfolio and then, travel around the world, making a world a more beautiful plan. And I managed to convince my two engineers' parents to agree to that. So when my dad overnight decided to pack stuff and told me to just kind of get into a suitcase kind of thing, not quite, but basically, nobody asked me what I thought. Um, I think there was a sort of period of, oh, I can't believe this just happened to me. And it took me a little while to be at peace with his decision.
Well, let me just say I can never imagine you as an average Jane, or an average Olga. Um, I wanted to ask you a little bit about that because I do understand that you initially had a passion for fine art and likely still do. So I just wanted to understand that a little better. Like what was your involvement with that? Was that, I'm sure it was part of your studies. You said something about a portfolio. What what was your interest at that point?
Yeah, it didn't actually start out as an interest. It started out, I am affectionately referred to as a work of art since the day I showed up on a planet Earth. And this story goes like this. I apparently, when my mother was pregnant, I'm a miracle child. She had a hard time getting pregnant. Took her 5 years. She finally got pregnant, and apparently, I was a kicker. Like I was kicking her all the time, and there are legends about it. My dad told everybody in his neighborhood that I will be a soccer player, and that implied that I would be a boy. Remember, this is a country that didn't have, predictions of gender and any of this stuff. So his expectations were set that I would basically be, Pelé or something, which is his standard for soccer. And then I showed up, and my mother said, "Look, do you like her? She's not quite the soccer player you hoped for." And his response was, "True, but she is a work of art." And that's kind of how it started. That was my dad's response, and that's sort of a story, the mythology that surrounds me from the day I showed up. I did not necessarily have a predisposition for art. In fact, I could not draw to save my life. I was not really good at it, but my best friend was really good at it, and she wanted to go to art school after school, which is sort of a formal education that you have for 5, 7 hours every day after school. And I went there because of social life. I really value my social life. I value my friends. And if my friends will be painting, sculpting, and drawing, so will I. My parents laughed at it when I asked them to pay for my art school education, but they never said no. And, for me, that was actually a valuable experience in that I realized that I can be born with no skills and I can acquire them, even if I have no intrinsic talent. And this was the first time in my life where I realized that I can go from zero to, pretty high. And that was very empowering. And actually, that's the lesson that sort of continues being part of who I am as an adult, as a lawyer, as an entrepreneur, as executive.
That sounds like a great lesson. And one that I hope our audience listens to is that you can create your own work of art. And that work of art, can be whatever you imagine it to be if you put your mind to it.
Yeah, absolutely. We are a work in progress.
Um, so you moved to San Francisco and you're a lawyer. You went to Bolt Law School and then transitioned to an interest in technology. So I'm very curious to how that happened. Did you have a mentor? Was there a particular experience that you had that turned you on to that intersection of law and technology? Like, how did that come about?
Yeah, I actually went to Berkeley Law exactly because I had an interest in technology. I would describe myself as a tech lawyer by design. I went to law school because I was interested in intellectual property, security, and privacy. I had some interest in sort of constitutional law, but not enough to really go to law school. I definitely had no interest in tax, some interest in criminal. Procedure was sort of a necessary evil. Estates and trusts, I had no necessary intrinsic interest, although I really liked that class. So I went to law school to be a tech lawyer, and I think it's because um, I saw, when you are in the middle of San Francisco, Silicon Valley, and everyone works for a technology company. I've noticed very early that impact on society and how much is lost in translation and and laws not keeping up with the development of technology is being an opportunity, an important gap. And my parents are engineers. There's the moment where I considered to become an engineer, and I love technology, and I'm actually pretty good at science and math, though I never necessarily wanted to be an engineer. But I found myself having a few jobs, including a job in law school where I helped acquisition of Flickr by Yahoo and was helping the company to transition and integrate and succeed, and absolutely loved it. So it wasn't any one person or any one moment or any one experience. It was being what I call part of Candyland. Like, of course, you eat candy in the Candyland. I think it was much more of that. And then, of course, the more interesting people, creative people that I met have been tinkering and building and experimenting and doing audacious things. And that very much reminded me of my experiences in art school. Remember, I didn't succeed in art school because, I was exceptionally good draftsman. I wasn't okay. I got better over time. I think I succeeded precisely because I kind of had nothing to lose and I was experimenting and really sort of tested that edge of creativity. And I found people like that in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, that, were what I call artists in their own domain, and I thought that would be cool. And I realized that I could contribute legal aspect that most of them misunderstand, have no interest in understanding, and I, on the other hand, could master. And so that was really why I went to Berkeley Law specifically, as opposed to any other law school at the time, and still has the top law and technology program. And I had various opportunities unavailable in other places. And then, of course, Berkeley is just generally a fantastic school that I highly recommend for anyone.
So it sounds like, as you said, Candyland kind of informed your choice that, of course, you're going to eat candy if you're in Candyland. For me, growing up in Los Angeles, Hollywood, right? Um, but it was more about the enthusiasm of those around you and how they creatively were approaching their own careers, and that you did that on your own and recreated that for yourself. One of the things I wanted to get into a little bit is that you went ahead and you founded Parley Pro, right? A
I was
CLM.
not a founder of Parley Pro. Most people assume that I was a founder of Parley Pro, and I'm flattered that you would think that I have the audacity to do that. But I was not a founder of Parley Pro. I was a lateral CEO. The investors and founders identified me. Investors approached me and asked me to join as CEO. I initially said no. Because the reason I said no, because I had other opportunities. I was at that point a serial general counsel. I had opportunities to be a general counsel of public companies. Joining a startup is equivalent to running away with a circus, especially that early. So that was an interesting, crazy decision, depending who you talk to. I initially said no to it. For about 6 months, they were persistent and consistent in following up, and I eventually said yes. And so I took the company to market after the company was built. Most, if not all, customers have been onboarded on my watch. And we got it to a significant revenue, sold it to LexisNexis. I also integrated it with LexisNexis. And I recently left. So, all of that to say that I am a foster parent, a very deeply caring, loving foster parent, but I'm not a biological mother. But I care for this baby as much as the founder would.
So Partly Pro was a contract lifecycle management software, correct?
Partly Pro, now Counseling CLM, is in fact a contract lifecycle management platform.
Okay. And so you said that, you kind of struggled with joining up with them. What what drove that? Like what was your hesitation on that?
I was happy in my career. You don't seek change when you're happy. I worked very hard to be a top lawyer, and I spent significant resources, including my time, in perfecting that craft and excelling at it. By the time this offer was on the table, I was about 15 years into my practice, and by then have been general counsel twice, and also was a VP of strategy of a Y Combinator company as well. So I had opportunities that were significantly lucrative and impactful and interesting and exciting, if by companies that are not maybe necessarily in legal tech but in other industries, and I've historically been in other industries, and are much more proven and more well funded and less risky. And I highly consider those opportunities too. In fact, you know if you're married, you would know that your spouse have a lot to do when you say yes, including to opportunities like employment opportunity. And my spouse has an opinion too. So this has been a conversation that we collectively discussed, and it took us a little while to say yes to that.
The thing is I know that a lot of attorneys that might be listening to this or watching it, they kind of have the same dilemma. Right now, there's all this talk about AI. There's all this talk about technology, and a lot of it people perceive as hype. Maybe people are kind of overselling it, and they're wondering whether or not to jump into this if they haven't already. Is this, just a passing fad? Is it something I should really invest in? And they're kind of like in that place where you were about whether or not it makes sense to invest themselves in it. Do you think it's worthwhile? Do you think it's something that they should dive into? And why?
That's a really good question. And, as there is really no one pass. I think there's just sort of the answer is really depends. Depends on who you are, why you're doing it, what's your definition of success, what kind of legacy you want to leave. All of those questions I was sort of asking myself at the time of making those decisions. As I said, one of the big important factors for me was I actually was a very happy general counsel. Like I didn't really like law school. I'll be frank with you. It was okay. It kind of did not live up to my expectations. Um, and I highly considered dropping out of law school. The practice of law, on the other hand, exceeded my expectations. I've had fantastic experiences. Not all of them were fantastic at any given point, and not all of them I would want to repeat again. But overall, I thoroughly enjoyed giving people legal advice. I like telling people what to do. I mean, what can I say? I really enjoyed that. And I really found my tribe when I became, in-house lawyer, especially number two lawyer, and then I became general counsel, number one lawyer. It felt like me. I've thoroughly enjoyed contributing to businesses and leading them through various milestones, whether it's going public, being acquired, selling them, um, buying them, testifying at regulatory agencies, fundraising, whatever. I thoroughly enjoyed every moment of that. So deciding to then kind of give it up at the height of my career where I had opportunities to do even bigger things was actually hard. But also the other thing that was true for me at the time is that I was finally at the point of my life where I could take risks. Yeah, we could afford to take risk, and I could afford to take risk, and that was not lost on me, that that timing was not bad. And it was also an opportunity to do something that I've never done before. What's true consistently in my career is that I've never had the same job twice, and I've never been the CEO of a tech company. I considered starting my own, but for various reasons did not. And that presented an opportunity where the product is built and I actually just have to take it to market. So it was kind of ideal should I ever want to try it. So I was considering all of those factors. For one thing, I don't think technology is a fad. I think it's here to stay. Do you drop everything and run away with a circus? That just depends on who you are and where you are in life. And frankly, can you afford the risks? I mean, I think that has to be part of your calculus. I am definitely not sort of heck with it all. I'll just do it. I'm much more intentional and will calculate risk and play scenarios and will seek input from folks I care about, including my spouse, my parents, my close friends, and then I will reach out to my network and ask them to give me insights, and then I will independently make a decision. So I went for those 6 months. I was definitely going through inventory of pros and cons, weighing, thinking, overthinking. I'm a lawyer. I'm a certified overthinker. So, and that's the decision I reached after 6 months. So I think there is no right way or wrong way to do it. I do think that it's not a fad, and I do think that you should become technologically literate and proficient and comfortable. But whether you run with a circus is such a personal decision. It really just depends on many things.
Yeah, I definitely hear you there. You need to weigh the pros and cons and make a decision based on that for yourself. Um, One thing that you definitely embody, to me at least, is an amazing communicator and social connector. The way that you draw people together and just, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves in terms of how many followers you have on LinkedIn and your ability to communicate like complex ideas in a simple way is just really excellent. And so and in addition to that, you've spoken 3 times at in TEDx talks and in many different conferences and presentations. And I, I guess not so much the subject matter, but of what you talked about, but I'd like to learn more about like your motivation behind all of that. Like what it must have been, I think, for anyone at first, something that's a little scary. There's anxiety with public speaking. What drives you to do that? What's your motivation behind it? How did you get through that?
So for me, the insecurity lies in English being my second language. Um, it doesn't lie in being seen publicly. I am an introvert, but I I don't mind being seen. And sometimes I prefer being seen if that means I will get what I want. So the anxiety is really around having an accent, being different, not being understood. Um, and that has been sort of a journey in overcoming that. And that's a journey of not just being a public speaker, that's also a journey of becoming a lawyer. Um, because, folks who become lawyers in the United States, they usually are on top of their class in terms of speaking, writing, and arguing. They are usually, in many of them, if not liberal arts majors, they are very verbal. And the expectation in the profession is that you're not even in 80th percentile or 90th percentile, you're like a 95th higher. So the expectation is that you're native, basically. And so for me, and I've learned that expectations kind of in the funny way when people in high school, when I didn't speak English, would ask me what I want to be when I grow up. I would say, yeah, I want to be a lawyer. And then they will look at me funny because I couldn't speak English. And they didn't want to tell a child that I couldn't become one. And so I really enjoyed them struggle. Like, what do I tell little Olga? Do I crush her dreams now or I'll let the life crush it for her? And then I would kind of play along with that. Um, and so for me, that was overcoming the accent portion of it. And so, and the public speaking became kind of more of a sport, if you will, because that's a necessary thing you have to do to be a top lawyer that I aspire to be. Um, I, over time, started enjoying it and feeling much more comfortable and and started to enjoy it and really realize that ideas are powerful. You can start something from A to B, move somebody to action, and then cheer them on to take it B to Z many people later. And, what started out as I need to become better at the way I show up in English became a powerful tool of making a difference in various verticals and industries that I care about. And so the reasons for showing up and speaking and communicating have changed, but I still continue learning and embracing various quirks, including my accent.
I think you're doing fantastic. I mean, you're definitely getting out there and motivating people and changing their minds, which is a very hard thing to do. I want to ask you about, you've talked about access to justice and technology and how the two things together can really make a difference. Do you still believe that? And how do you think AI has improved the chances of making this a more equal society in terms of access to the legal system?
Look, technology is a tool, and any tool can be, knife is a tool. You can use it to cure if you're a doctor, and you can use it to kill if you're a criminal. Anything, any tool could be used for good or bad. I think technology is a tool. It's a powerful tool, and it can make a powerful difference when used correctly. Um, I've practiced in-house for majority of my career, but I've been able to operationalize my practice and make meaningful impact on the companies I have been at, through leadership skills by hiring right and yes, using technology. I basically used different widgets that were available in other departments to operationalize law, and then I've written a lot about it on Above the Law and ACC. And the reason I shared those ideas because I was looking for people like me who happen to be in a different zip code. And that's kind of how the sort of community building and communication and journey started. So I lived firsthand how much difference technology can make for an organization, whether it's a nonprofit or for profit, whether it's small or big. And I've led those changes. I think you can definitely imagine a world where, in the hands of well intended operators who have an outcome in mind and work toward that goal and ask themselves at every step, is this the right thing to do? Are we doing good things? Can we do this better? Absolutely. I've done a TEDx talk about the fact that I think our legal system doesn't serve. And this is not just access to justice problem, meaning for folks who do not have money. I think it's actually pretty equal opportunity. Most of us have a broken relationship with law. Like, if I ask you what you just signed, you probably have no idea. I don't know what I sign most of the time. And I've accepted it as normal, and I'm a lawyer. I mean, I consider myself a top lawyer. So we have a relationship with law that is broken. I have an insurance policy, which is, insurance is a financial instrument, but wrapped in a legal wrapper, which is so unhuman and that nobody wants to touch it. I don't want to touch it. I read my insurance and I want to stop. I don't understand what's in it. So I can definitely imagine using tools to make that experience better for everyone in every income bracket. And I think that opportunity is there. It does require operators who are knowledgeable, well intended, um, caring, and really have a vision and a goal in mind so that they have an ability and capacity and humbleness to say, am I doing the right thing? Can I do this better at every point?
And humbleness, I think, is extremely important. And part of humbleness is listening to what people are saying and whether or not what you're doing is actually helping them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Some things we have are working and some things are not. And the only way you find out if when you talk to the user. I think absolutely right that humbleness and empathy are mission critical for any builder, especially in law, because remember, people do not come to lawyers to have a good time. They come to lawyer when things are not working out for them. People get introduced to law and lawyers like when they go through a divorce, when they get sued, when they about to sign an employment contract, stuff like that, where they really are in pain. That's when they come to see a lawyer. And so understanding what would be helpful at that moment to them and frankly community of people who care about them. I think it's a communal problem to have legal problem many times. I think it's very important and designing solutions that address it where legal is one of component of many, I think will require an empathy and humbleness and frankly rethinking what we've done so far.
One thing that you just mentioned, and you mentioned it a few times, and I think it is definitely a strength that you have is community, right? And a lot of times, I think when we talk about technology or AI specifically, we look at kind of the end result. We look at what does the tool do, right? And we kind of narrowly focus on that. But something that's even more powerful than that is that you have a community of people that would be interested in that using that tool, or that you can educate about the importance of that tool and how it could benefit them. And so the question I have for you is like, you obviously have been very successful at cultivating a community. How how did you do that? How do you think it's benefited um the causes that you've wanted to champion, and how would you recommend to people to make that a part of what they do?
Yeah, it's really interesting. When people ask me this question, it's a little bit like asking a bird, how to fly. She's gonna say, "Oh, I'm just doing this." So, and then I'm just like taking you off the ground, and you say, "Oh, I'm doing this," and I'm still on the ground. Sometimes, I think it's part of it is sharing my experiences as I go through life and looking for like-minded people so I'm not alone. Remember, I was upset when we immigrated because I lost my friends. I went to art school because I wanted to be with my friends. I didn't want to partially leave being general counsel because many of my friends are general counsel and that was a new community and I was like I am very motivated to to stay with my friends and I've now actually been reconnecting with a lot of folks in various geographies and from various parts of life because we moved a lot and it gives me a lot of joy. And so I didn't set out to build a community any more than the bird thinks twice about flying. It was more about I found myself doing something. I looked around. I couldn't find another person who does this. Then I looked in my zip code. I found nobody or found one or two people. And then I thought, well, the world is bigger than my zip code. Let me find a few more. And so I started writing on various platforms. And and or social media, and attracted those people that I would never meet in real life because they're not in my zip code, and we do not ride the elevator together, and chances are of us bumping together are pretty low. So that's really kind of what it has and is for me. What I write about and what I share changes as I change. It very much reflects about things that I'm thinking today and challenges that I'm solving today and things I want to learn more about. And I share kind of all of it in hopes that somebody says, "Oh, that's my life too. Let me talk to you, and maybe together we can be a team." And it turns out when you sort of share, your hopes and dreams and challenges, people it resonates with people who may not even care about it because, we call it authenticity. I call it showing up as you are. But really, it's about deeply caring about something and looking for people who know something about who can help. And, what you call as a community is just really a lot of folks who have been on the journey with me through all my pivots and changes. And sometimes they come up and say, "Oh, you're now doing something that I'm interested in. I want to be part of it." So it's really more about solving challenges together and that community aspect of it, the social part that I find enjoyable because I think any challenge is just more fun to solve together.
I totally agree. And I think especially now post-COVID, so many of us are working from home or we're working remotely that we get disconnected. And so that when we get to see each other and, support each other and feel and see that community, it's definitely something that's makes me feel happy and comforted that there's other people out there going through the same thing that I am. Something you also mentioned was that, the jumps that you made, like going to work at Parley Pro, of going to, work as a GC, like some of those things that you mentioned were the obvious answer wasn't, okay, I'm going to dive into that, right? And like what you were saying, that when you were working as a GC, you really enjoyed it, you're really good at it, you had a lot of friends there. So one would naturally think the conclusion would be, oh, so I decided not to work, with that company. But you made the jump anyways. And there was a few examples that you gave that were similar to that, where you made the jump anyways. What, and I consider that brave. What what caused you to do that? Like what brought that on? Like what, I'm sure it was different, a different calculus with each decision, but was there a common thread behind it?
Yeah, two things. I value education and impact. As I mentioned, I never had the same job twice, and I tend to, value kind of sort of the normal things, my compensation and all that. But I also, at equal footing, will say, will I learn something that I don't already know, or will I be doing kind of more of what I've been doing before in a slightly different industry with slightly different regulators, with slightly different set of characters. Um, and I think when you ask the question of will I learn something significantly more, if you consistently ask that question, you will end up pivoting most of the time. And then a second question I asked is impact. That's another pillar in addition to sort of the basics that I ask about. You know, am I sort of what is the legacy I'm leaving, and will will that life matter? And that's I think when you ask that question as well, you're more likely to pivot. Especially when you give those two things an equal voice as you would to all the basic of compensation and titles and whatever vacations, whatever it is you and your family care about, for you to be even comfortable to say yes to that. Um, and so I do ask those two questions, that those actually sort of become overwhelmingly important in deciding what I'm doing next. And I end up with what may seem a non-obvious or a logical, depending on your point of view, conclusion that it's time to do something else.
I love that. The deeper considerations, the life meaningful considerations that go into making different career choices. If we have any law students or young professionals that are watching, it used to be that what you do and what I do and what some others do within the legal tech community, that it would be viewed as like an alt legal profession or an alt legal choice. And I think that's really started to fall away as alt legal. It actually is just a very valid a very valid choice to pursue something besides just being a lawyer. If any young professionals or law students are watching this, what advice would you give them based upon your experience of how they should, make their choices about what to pursue?
Well, I'm a person who basically tells everyone not to follow advice. So it's only ironic that you asked me to give people advice. And the reason it's sort of, I guess, let me explain this. Because the reality is, I graduated from law school now a long time ago, without AI and all of this. I actually don't know what it's like to graduate from law school today and what opportunities you look at. Me telling you what you should do, like my children laugh when I tell them what they should do, as they should laugh. I have a almost 13 and almost 15-year olds. They're adult enough, and aware enough, and it is very clear that they have been born in a different time and already possess a different set of skills and face a very different reality. And because they're my children, they don't have to be diplomatic. They basically, will tell me that thank you, mom, if they're nice, or just ignore me, or frankly, tell me that they know what they're doing. And look, I think that's a correct response. I really do, because I look at the AI changes from the point of view of somebody who achieved something in law, technology, and business, and have had certain experiences that worked for me. I think the circumstances have changed. And my solution to go forward may very differ for someone who just graduated from law school. I personally seek a lot of advice. I frankly discard a lot of it, not because I'm not grateful or disrespectful. I'm more interested in people articulating why they made choices as opposed to what choices they made. Because when I hear somebody's articulation of why, I can make a decision if their why matches mine. And it turns out that many whys did not match mine. And so therefore you end up sort of learning and discarding, and it's still very useful because it helps your thinking. So I do recommend that you talk to people, ask them for advice, specifically around why, how did they make the decision they made, what risk factors they consider, what they try to optimize, and what they try to minimize. Because then and only then can you say that point of view is relevant to you. It could be 100% exactly where you are, or may not be, which is should be most of it because people are pretty different. And then be very clear about kind of who you are, what you want to stand for today, and that may change over time. And if you find someone who basically walked your path, then by all means go ahead. Now you have a recipe, go for it. And if you don't find the exact match, which is likely going to happen to like 95% of the people, then I recommend to look at all the learnings you've had through your interviews and conversations and make a collage of stuff that may work for you and test that hypothesis.
Okay, so one question I have to ask you, which is a very natural one, given how active you are and how much you have on your plate, is just how you do it. Like, do you believe in work-life balance? Do you think that there is a way to to take all that you do and still have, a personal life that you're fully invested in? Like, how do you make it work?
I love it when people ask me about being balanced because I think most people who know me pretty well would never describe me as balanced. However, I think it works for me. I'm not sure there is an ideal way to be balanced. And maybe I'm just the wrong person to ask. Maybe there is, and I'm just unaware of it. But it took me a long time to realize that my hobbies, meaning digital transformation of law, which I was basically doing nights and weekends after I was practicing law, could actually be a full-time job. It only like took me 15 years to get to that conclusion. Like, so you know I'm a slow learner. But I do learn eventually. There's hope. I've now integrated everything I love into my existence. I no longer think about it like what I do part-time or full-time. I am very actively taking things that I love doing and discarding stuff that my life is complete without. And that makes me balanced in my definition of being balanced. That does include I have very warm and great relationship with my children, and my spouse and my mother, and I have many friends. All of them are incorporated and integrated into the things that give me joy. And things that do not give me joy find themselves exiting my life. I think that's maybe the way to look at it, is just sort of keeping things that really resonate and add to your internal external balance and saying goodbye. I think sometimes it's necessary to say goodbye. I've said a lot of goodbyes and I've become much better at saying goodbyes. I think it's a necessary step forward.
And I think you may have already answered this one with what you just said, but at the end of the day, with all of this, like what makes it worthwhile for you?
My goal is to make sure that we have a better relationship with law in my lifetime. And the time frame of it is actually important. I think the arch of history is bending toward that direction. The real question, will I get to see that? Because the arch of history is much longer than Olga's lifespan, although I have every intention to live forever. And that's really sort of the benchmark of what can I do today to see that change in my lifetime. And let me put it in perspective, because I come from a corporate world. In any corporation, if you hire a consultant, 3 to 5% improvement is considered significant improvement in the context of a public company, because you're looking at significant revenue. I'm looking in the context of the United States or world population, a very large population. So my benchmark is about 10 to 20% difference in my lifetime. That's a very audacious goal, and I should be able to see it. That's what I want. 10 to 20% of improvement in our relationship with law in my lifetime.
I think that is an audacious goal, but one that's worth achieving for sure.
I agree.
Well, Olga, it's been a pleasure to get to know you better. And for those in the audience that want to keep in touch with you and learn more, how can they do that?
Oh, LinkedIn. I walk the hallways of LinkedIn daily. I've reached the limit of friendships allowed on LinkedIn, so connecting with me probably not going to be helpful, but you can follow me if you want to be in conversations with me. And I've now enabled a feature on LinkedIn that anybody can email me without paying to LinkedIn. So you can still reach out to me through the LinkedIn Messenger as well, in addition to following me, because I do like having conversations, and I measure success on LinkedIn not on posts, likes, or reshares. I measure it on the quality of conversations I have in my DM and real life. So I look forward to the real life conversations that change lives.
And I know you're going to be speaking at Future Law in May. Are there any other conferences coming up that you want to make note of?
Oh, yeah, there are conferences coming up. Future Law is a good one. I don't remember where I'm going. It's in my calendar. But if you want to know, I will be sharing my itinerary as I go on LinkedIn. Definitely follow.
Okay, great. Well, thanks again, Olga. And thank you to our audience. Really appreciate you coming, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you, Tom.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for watching the latest episode of the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. To keep in the loop about upcoming episodes, please subscribe to LawDroid Manifesto and you'll get notified. Thanks for watching. See you next time.